For today's caper, we dive into the intriguing case of Bobbi Parker, a woman entangled in a web of love, maybe, escape, and alleged manipulation. With conflicting narratives of love and coercion, we explore the twists and turns of this captivating story. From Bobbi's controversial romance to the alleged threats and a fateful disappearance, we seek to uncover the truth in a story where the line between captor and captive become a bit fuzzy. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. I don't know how I managed this, but we have another kidnapping case of this season almost right away, just a few episodes ago. I could have moved them around, but I didn't. This case features a white lady, so the drink is called the White Lady. I am not accepting feedback at this time. The White Lady cocktail is a classic drink that has been around since the early 1900s. It is not clear exactly where it came from, but it is thought to have been first crafted in the 1910s or 1920s. Even though nobody knows for sure where the White Lady came from, it is often linked to London's Savoy Hotel and the famous bartender Harry Craddock. Harry put the recipe for the White Lady in his famous cocktail book, the Savoy Cocktail Book, which came out in 1930. This helped make the drink popular. The White Lady is a favorite among cocktail enthusiasts. It tastes smooth and elegant, and if you ask me, it looks that way too. The cocktail is traditionally made with three primary ingredients: gin, Cointreau, an orange liqueur, and lemon juice. We're going to go with a slight variation on this one, which involves an egg white. Don't like the idea of a raw egg white in your drink? First of all, where is your sense of adventure? Second of all, just omit it. For the cocktail, take 2 parts gin, half a part of orange liqueur, and half a part lemon juice, and add that to a shaker with your egg white. But no ice to start. You're going to do something I learned recently, which is called dry shaking. So no ice means you dry shake it. So dry shake it first to combine the egg white and get it nice and frothy. Is frothy a gross word? I think it's fine. Anyway, after you've combined those ingredients, add ice and shake again until it's nice and chilled. You'll strain it into a cold glass with no ice in it. For the mocktail, we shall take 2 parts non-alcoholic gin. Remember, the non-alcoholic spirit links are in the description box. Half a part of orange juice, half a part of lemon juice, and 1 egg white. Dry shake these ingredients in a shaker, then add ice and shake to chill. Strain into a chilled ice and garnish both with a lemon wheel if you fancy. Oh, and YouTube viewers, did you notice that I bought myself some new fancy cocktail glasses? A drink like this needs a delicate, smaller glass, so I bit the bullet and invested. I feel so fancy drinking out of them. On April 4th, 2005, a sheriff in a Texas county near Louisiana got a strange phone call. There might be a fugitive living in his county. So he and his deputies headed to a rather rundown mobile home on a chicken farm in Campty, Texas. Campty is a speck-on-a-map town 60 miles southwest of Shreveport, Louisiana, and 200 miles southeast of Dallas. The sheriff had gotten the call after a tipster saw the case on America's Most Wanted and phoned it in. There lived a couple, Samantha and Richard Deal. When they arrived, Richard said, "I knew you were coming. I just didn't know when." He was arrested without incident, despite there being a loaded pistol on the kitchen table and a shotgun by the front door. They found Samantha just down the road at another farm and arrested her too. But things were only about to get the most interesting possible. You see, Richard and Samantha Deal weren't Richard and Samantha Deal at all. The man was Randolph Dial, a self-proclaimed hitman and escaped convict. And Samantha? Well, Samantha was really Bobbi Parker, a school teacher and the wife of the deputy warden of the prison where Randolph had escaped over a decade earlier. Bobbi Parker grew up on a farm in north central Kansas. She would say she had a normal upbringing and a good childhood. She graduated high school and went to college just over the border in Oklahoma, and she met Randy Parker there. They got married in 1982 and within 4 years had 2 daughters. Bobbi was a teacher and Randy worked in corrections. At one point, they actually worked in the same prison, with Bobbi teaching inmates with special needs at the prison where Randy also worked. In 1992, Randy was named deputy warden at the Oklahoma State Reformatory in Granite, Oklahoma. The family moved onto the prison grounds into a house that was just on the other side of the prison walls. Bobbi would say that life, quote, slowed down for me and my family, but it was good, end quote. Her daughters were 8 and 11 years old at the time. A new warden also moved into town, and he was there to shake things up a bit, evidently. At the time, Randolph Dial was one of the most infamous inmates in Oklahoma, imprisoned at the Oklahoma State Reformatory. He had drunkenly confessed in 1986 to killing a karate instructor for money in 1981. He claimed it was a contract killing for the mob. But Randolph was also a renowned artist. One of his sculptures had appeared on the set of the TV show Dallas, an oil rig, naturally. He was said to be charming and charismatic, although Bobbi would later say she didn't think he was either one of those things. The warden wanted to promote Randolph's art, so he started an art program that Randolph would run from the garage of the Parker house. Inmates would make pottery and sell it. Since the garage was outside of the wall, Randolph had to have his security clearance lowered to minimum security status, which the warden did, even though he was a convicted murderer. Anyway, Randolph started making the pottery in the garage and wanted to teach Bobbi. Bobbi, who was 32 years old at the time, agreed, but said that it had to be done out front because she didn't feel comfortable with them in the garage alone together. She said it was never good to be one-on-one with an inmate. However, not only were they working on art together on the front lawn, still kind of alone anyway, she started getting permission to take Randolph to different places to sell the inmates' art, so they would travel together, alone. On the morning of August 30th, 1984, the Parker family had breakfast together, and then the girls went to school and Randy went to work. When he left for the prison, Randy saw Randolph working in the garage studio but didn't think anything of it. When Randy came home later that afternoon, Bobbi was gone, but there was a note left for him saying that she went to the store. Perfectly normal behavior, so he didn't worry about it until she hadn't returned by the early evening. Suspicious, he called the prison and asked an officer to look in Randolph's cell. It was empty. Bobbi's version of the story goes like this. She remembered in the morning feeling woozy and thinking she was going to be sick. She didn't remember or how or why she felt that way or what happened immediately after, but suddenly she saw Randolph inside her house, and she wondered why he was there. But then he pulled her up, and she said, quote, "My legs went out from under me," end quote. Then she remembered nothing until she woke up and somehow she was driving her own minivan. Randolph was on the floorboards holding a knife to her. She had blood on her leg and her arm, and she discovered she was somewhere in Texas. That same night, Bobbi called her mom, saying, quote, "Tell the kids I'll see them soon," end quote. She would also call twice over the next few days, once again to her mom and once to a girlfriend, but she did not call Randy. A manhunt for Bobbi and Randolph ensued, with prayer vigils all over Granite. Randy would say that he didn't know what had happened to Bobbi, but had all the terrible ideas running through his head. Kidnapping, murder, and whatever other terrible things you can have running through your head. The FBI searched for the both of them for 8 months, but then the Oklahoma City bombing happened in April of 1995, and resources had to be redirected towards seeking justice for that terrorist attack. And Bobbi and Randolph's case was largely forgotten. In Wichita Falls, Texas, the minivan was discovered dumped and empty, except for Randolph's cigarettes of choice. Bobbi would say that immediately Randolph started beating her severely. He threatened her with hurting her family if she tried to leave. They moved to a small town in East Texas and started presenting as a married couple to everyone who met them, something they would do for the entirety of the nearly 11 years that they were on the run. In 1997, 3 years into the escape, Randolph started a pottery company called Terracotta Gardens, which they advertised for on the radio. At one point, Randolph was invited to speak at a women's luncheon at a local country club. Bobbi said she was left tied up at home that day. Eventually, they would move to work on a chicken farm owned by Deborah Grace. She believed that they were married, but knew that Bobbi was being abused. At one point, Deborah and Randolph had a conversation where Randolph said he could beat Bobbi because she was his wife. Deborah said, "Not at my farm." She tried to get Bobbi to leave Randolph and just come to her house, but Bobbi refused. Bobbi said that Randolph also once killed 2 of her dogs to punish her. Bobbi and Randolph moved into the mobile home at a larger chicken ranch and lived an isolated life in Kamptee, Texas. Their trailer was on a wooded lot across from 5 long metal chicken houses, but it was quite isolated. They didn't engage in personal conversations and rarely went into town. When Bobbi did go into town, however, neighbors thought she was wearing a disguise of some kind. She would wear a straw hat pulled tight to her head with a scarf and a baggy dress. Residents of Kamptee say the pair kept to themselves over the years, never engaged in any conversations, and avoided going to the nearby town of Center whenever possible. In April of 2005, hot off the tip from America's Most Wanted, the 2 were arrested, and it didn't take long for Bobbi to tell officials who she really was. When Randy learned that his wife was alive and safe, he drove 6 hours overnight to get to her. They had an emotional reunion that Texas Ranger Tom Davis witnessed, saying, quote, "It looked like a husband and wife who hadn't seen each other in 11 years, end quote. Randolph waived extradition and was brought to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. Immediately upon his arrest, he told reporters that he had abducted Bobbi at knife point. He would say, quote, "She was living under the impression if she ever tried to get away, I would get away and I would make her regret it, particularly toward her family. I didn't mean it, but she didn't know that," end quote. He said he brainwashed her with this threat of violence into staying with him as they moved from small Texas town to small Texas town. He declared, quote, "I was a hostage taker and will probably live to regret it. But now I don't. Doing a life sentence at my age, I wouldn't trade it for the past 10.5 years, end quote. Investigators thoroughly searched that mobile home on the chicken farm and found some suspicious items. There were condoms and years worth of Valentine's cards, some from Randolph to Bobbi and some from Bobbi to Randolph. There were photographs of Bobbi smiling. They discovered that every few weeks, Bobbi would drive by herself to a grocery store in Center to cash her paycheck. The grocery store was directly across the street from the Shelby County Sheriff's Office. In 2004, Randolph had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital for several nights. Bobbi stayed by his side and wrote him a heartfelt letter. She talked about how much she loved him and how much they enjoyed being together. It said, among other things, quote, "We've had a great ride. Let us enjoy life, celebrate living, for it is so short. God placed me in your path for a reason," end quote. There were 2 bedrooms in the mobile home, but it was clear that only one was used for sleeping. Their clothes were intermingled in the drawers. Immediately after being arrested, Bobbi said over and over again to authorities that she would not cooperate. And in one of the most bizarre things in the case, at one point, 7 years after the escape, a true crime author somehow found Randolph's phone number and called him. He asked about Bobbi and was told that of course she was alive, and Randolph offered to put her on the phone. The author asked Bobbi if she was all right, and she said she was fine and she was happy. The author would say that she didn't seem stressed or coerced at all when she said that. On the 3rd anniversary of tracking down Bobbi and Randolph in April of 2008, Bobbi was arrested and charged with assisting Randolph's escape from prison. She refused to plead out because she didn't want to plead to a crime she said she didn't commit. In 2011, a trial took place in a courthouse in rural southwestern Oklahoma. Jury selection itself took almost 7 weeks, and the trial was 3 months long. It was, at least at the time, the longest trial in state history. The prosecutor alleged that Bobbi was in love with Randolph and helped him escape. An inmate testified to seeing Bobbi and Randolph driving away in the family minivan, Bobbi giving him a surprised look as she drove past. They argued that because of Randolph's lower security clearance, he could have escaped the prison grounds without needing to take Bobbi with him. The defense maintained that Bobbi was drugged, kidnapped, abused, and regularly sexually assaulted. Randolph couldn't testify because he had died in an Oklahoma prison in 2007 after a lengthy illness at 62 years old. The defense would tell the jury that Randolph had said over 100 times that he had kidnapped Bobbi. Bobbi did not testify in her own defense. On September 21st, 2011, a jury found Bobbi Parker guilty of assisting a prisoner to escape. She was immediately incarcerated and was unable to fight the sentence with an appeal because she needed the trial transcript. But the trial transcript was so long, it would have cost her $100,000. She was also charged with paying $67,000 in court fees, which she's paying back to the tune of $100 per month, even still. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison, but she was released after 6 months on April 6th, 2012. Her attorney would say it was the, quote, most outrageous case I've ever been involved in. It's a great miscarriage of justice, end quote. Okay, so because it's my channel, I get to give you my opinion. I listened to a lot of opinions about this and read a lot of articles, and I listened to the Dateline podcast, which was originally a Dateline episode, in which Bobbi herself tells her story for the first and maybe only time. I actually listened to that episode first, and I'm usually the kind of gal that puts a lot of stock in the first thing I listen to or watch, you know? Not that I should, but no one said I'm an unbiased reporter. However, I think she had to have been involved. I think he probably was charismatic and charming. I think he wooed her. A couple of things lead me to believe this is probably the truth. Why would Randolph bring this woman with him, undoubtedly a liability, when he could have just escaped by himself? It doesn't make sense to bring an entire other person along when it's likely he could have escaped and stayed hidden forever. Why would Bobbi make several phone calls at the beginning of her disappearance and not call her husband one time? She called a girlfriend and not Randy. There were so many times Bobbi could have escaped when she was with Randolph. He was hospitalized, for goodness sakes. Bobbi told authorities that she wouldn't cooperate with them. Later, she would say this was because she was still scared of Randolph, but come on. The man had held her hostage for a decade. He'd kept her from seeing her girls grow up, taken years away from her life, and she's saying she won't help authorities bring him to justice? That is wildly suspicious to me. My guess is he wined her and dined her into leaving with him, did some ghost-like pottery on the wheel, you know what I mean, and then they decided to run off together. It didn't take long for him to show his true violent colors, however, but by that time she was in an actual relationship, an abusive relationship, but a traditional abusive relationship, not a kidnapped one. I think she did love him, at least for a while. To this day, Bobbi Parker maintains that she was held hostage for all those years by Randolph Dial. She says that everything she did in that decade with Randolph was to ensure her survival. Her husband, Randy Parker, has supported her every single step of the way. The two of them remain married, living in Lexington, Oklahoma. Their girls are grown and married. A long and winding road to a happy ending, I suppose, no matter what her intentions were. Thanks for hanging out with me. You know, I hear enough of these tales of prison guards and people around prisoners gone wild to think that maybe this is not a job for me. Well, that might not be the only reason. Now is the time where I tell you that you should definitely 100% check out the description box for each episode. There are fun things there. You can get the cocktail and mocktail recipe for each episode. You can see the ingredients list for next week's drinks, links to all social media, the link to book a live show, and links to the sources I use for each episode in case you want to learn more. I do source a lot of different links for each episode and try really hard not to make mistakes, so you can see where I got my info from. Next week is an off week, so I'll see you in 2 weeks. And remember, there are always alternatives to breaking your lover out of prison and pretending to be kidnapped by them.